In the marshes of southwestern Louisiana, researchers spent 3 years catching wild canids, sedating them, and putting them on a scale. 24 animals, every one filed under the same species, coyote, on the paperwork, in the regulations, and in the mind of anyone who passed one at dusk on a marsh road. Then they ran the genetics on all 24 and plotted weight against ancestry. The line went up. The more of a particular kind of DNA an animal carried, the heavier it was. Not slightly, measurably, consistently, with a clean statistical relationship running straight through the sample. And the DNA the heaviest animals were carrying did not belong to a coyote at all. It belonged to a species this country wrote off as gone from the wild in 1980. Start with what a coyote is supposed to weigh, because everything here hangs off that number. Out west, where the species actually comes from, an adult coyote runs somewhere around 20 to 30 pounds. It is a small animal. People are consistently surprised by how small when they see one dead on a roadside instead of moving through a field at distance. It evolved on open desert and grassland, hunting rabbits and rodents, and it is built for that. Light, quick, forgettable. The animals on the Gulf Coast are not that. The most recent survey of them, published this year, describes them in language that should stop you. Tall, lanky, longer in the leg than the coyotes inland. Body proportions that match not a coyote, but a wolf-coyote hybrid. Oversized ears, and a head that is still, stubbornly, coyote-sized. A small skull on a frame that has outgrown it. And then the sentence that reframes the whole thing. The largest males in that coastal population are approaching the size of the smallest female red wolves, not approaching a big coyote, approaching a wolf. And it is worth understanding how unusual that is, because coyotes do vary by region, and biologists know the pattern well. Head northeast, and the animals get heavier. The coyotes of New England and the Adirondacks run roughly double the western weight, and that is well documented and well explained. Those animals picked up wolf DNA on their way east around the Great Lakes, and the extra size came with it. That story is settled science and has been for over a decade. But the northeastern animals got their wolf genes from a wolf that still exists. There are eastern wolves in Ontario. The source is alive, the crossing is understood, and nobody is surprised by any of it. The Gulf Coast animals are carrying genes from a species that has no wild source population at all. There is no reservoir of red wolves in Louisiana for a coyote to breed with. There has not been one in the lifetime of most people watching this. Whatever is in those animals got in before the door closed, and it has been passed down, animal to animal, ever since. And it is still, measurably, making them bigger. So work it like a wildlife officer would, because there are 3 obvious explanations, and they all fail. The first is dogs. When a wild canid looks wrong, the first guess is almost always that something got into it from a farmyard. And most of the time, that guess is correct. It is not right here. Domestic dog ancestry does exist in coyote populations across North America, but it does not produce this. It does not produce longer legs, a lanky frame, wolf-proportioned limbs, and a coyote skull. Dog crosses tend to produce animals that look like dogs. The second is escaped wolves. There are no wild wolves in Louisiana. There have not been for most of a century. And an escaped captive animal is a single animal. It does not produce a consistent regional body type across hundreds of square miles of marsh. The third is simply that people are exaggerating, which is the explanation applied to every large animal report in America, and which is usually correct. It fails here for the simplest reason available. These animals were caught. They were weighed. Somebody wrote the number down. That is what separates this from every big cat story you have ever heard. There is no eyewitness problem because there are no eyewitnesses. There are scales, which leaves the DNA, and the DNA is where this stops being about size and starts being about something stranger. The red wolf is a full species in its own right, and it is America's alone, assise. No other country has ever had one. Put it between a gray wolf and a coyote in size, and you have it about right. Its range once covered the southeast from Texas to the Atlantic. We destroyed it on purpose. Bounties, traps, poison, federal predator control, decade after decade. And as the numbers fell, a second process finished what the shooting started. Coyotes were pushing east into ground the wolves were vacating, and a wolf with no mate of its own species available takes what it can find. By the middle of the last century, the survivors on the Texas-Louisiana coast had stopped being a clean species at all. Biologists call what was left a hybrid swarm, every gradation between the two animals, blending into each other faster than anyone could document it. So the Fish and Wildlife Service reached into that swarm and salvaged what it could. Hundreds of animals trapped and tested. 14 passed. By 1980, the species was formally gone from the wild, and from then on, everything still moving through those marshes was officially a coyote. Nobody seriously questioned that for 38 years. Then somebody sequenced them. The animals in southwestern Louisiana carry red wolf ancestry ranging from 20% to 69%, averaging around 38% across the population. And the timing matters. That ancestry was acquired within roughly the last 30 years, which means this is not a fossil signal left over from 1980. It is ongoing. Across the border on Galveston Island, the figure is around 13%. On the Texas mainland, 21%. There is a gradient running along that coastline, and the researcher who has spent the most time on these animals describes it exactly that way. The Louisiana animals carry significantly more than the Galveston ones, and all of them belong to the same coastal population. Now put that back against the scale. 24 animals weighed, ancestry plotted against weight. A clear positive correlation, published in a peer-reviewed journal, showing that the more red wolf DNA a Louisiana canid carries, the bigger that animal is. The size is not folklore. The size is the genome expressing itself. And here is what makes it stranger than a simple hybrid story. These animals are not just bigger, they are a type. The most recent work concludes they are not a random scatter of mixed individuals, but a stable, locally adapted ecotype. A distinct kind of canid shaped by the wolf DNA inside it and by the specific country it lives in. The shape makes sense once you see the habitat. Tall, long-legged animals with big ears move better through unstable, muddy, flooded terrain than short-legged ones do. These are coastal marshes and river floodplains, ground that swallows an ordinary coyote. The build is not an accident of mixed parentage. It is an adaptation, and it is being selected for. Their diet has changed with them. Inland coyotes across the South lean heavily on white-tailed deer. These animals barely touch deer. What they eat is nutria, the enormous invasive marsh rodent that has been eating the Louisiana coastline for decades. A predator that grew into wetland country and then specialized in the animal destroying it. And they are hard to kill. Annual survival in that population runs high enough that researchers now suspect it works as an engine. Young animals pushed out of the marsh each year, walking inland, carrying that ancestry into counties where nobody has ever run a genetic test, which is the part that should sit with you. Whatever this animal is becoming, it is not staying where it is. And there is a question underneath all of this that nobody has answered, because nobody has run the study that would answer it. Ancestry in these animals is not stable. It ranges from 20% to nearly 70% across a single population, which means individual animals sit at wildly different points on that scale, and the ones at the top of it are the biggest. What nobody has established is which direction the whole population is moving. If red wolf ancestry confers an advantage in that landscape, and a larger, longer-legged animal in flooded marsh country plausibly has one, then selection would push the average up over time. The population would drift toward the wolf, not away from it. If it confers no advantage, the ancestry dilutes and eventually disappears, the way most introgressed DNA does. Nobody knows which of those is happening. It would take decades of tracking to find out, and the animals in question are legally classified as vermin, which is not a category that attracts long-term research funding. So there is a population somewhere on the Gulf Coast getting larger, and no one can tell you whether that is a phase or a direction. Now let me be straight with you, because that is the whole point of this channel. The headline version of this story is that wolves are secretly alive in Louisiana. That is not what the science says, and the researchers themselves are careful about it. These are coyotes. The papers say so plainly. Coyotes admixed with some red wolf ancestry, with intermediate body sizes and small coyote heads. They are not red wolves, and nobody is claiming they are. The formal conclusion is that they are a wetland ecotype of the coyote derived from a mid-20th century hybrid swarm. That is a much narrower claim than the one a headline would make. The weight correlation is real, but it comes from 24 animals, which is a small sample, and it explains part of the variation in body size rather than all of it. Nobody has demonstrated that the ancestry causes the size in a controlled way. It is a correlation in a wild population, and wild populations are messy. And Gulf Coast canid is a research term, not a legal one. These animals remain classified as coyotes, which means that across most of that coastline they can be killed on site, year-round, no report required, including an animal carrying 2/3 of the genome of a critically endangered species. But conceding all of that does not make the animal ordinary, because the actual finding is stranger than the headline. Fewer than 40 red wolves survive in the wild today, all of them in one corner of North Carolina, descended from those 14 founders. That is the official population, the one with a recovery program, a budget, and federal protection. Then there is the other population. Nobody manages it. Nobody protects it. Nobody has counted it. Its animals carry anywhere from 1/5 to 2/3 of the same genome, grow measurably heavier the more of it they carry, have reshaped themselves for marsh country, live on an invasive rodent, and send their young inland every year. Everything we tried to preserve behind a fence, some fraction of it was out there the whole time, rebuilt piece by piece inside the body of the animal that helped dissolve it, under a name that guaranteed nobody would check. So it comes back to 24 animals on a scale in a Louisiana marsh, and a line on a graph going up. Every one of them logged as a coyote. Every one of them legal to kill. And the heaviest ones in that sample were the ones carrying the most DNA from a wolf the United States buried in 1980. Animals that a field guide would call one thing, that the law calls another, and that are, by the numbers, drifting towards something that no longer has a name. Nobody can tell you where that ends. The ancestry is still moving. The animals are still spreading. And the largest males out there tonight, walking the marsh edges on long legs with a small head and a wolf's ears, are already big enough to be mistaken for the thing we thought we lost.